Hello, I'm Laura from Wild at Heart Equestrian, and I want to show you how to make a Browband. So here's a Browband that I've made. You can see that I make them curved, so I know some people make them straight, but I think they're meant to be worn like this. I want the beads to lay flat when they're on the horse's head, and so yeah, so I typically make them curved like this so that once they go on the horse's head there's no bulging or stretching, and they're ready to go and look nice. So this is one that I made, and you can kind of see, maybe you can't see, but there's little threads in between. And so a general overview is that you would string all the beads onto a strong thread. You sew that in and you tie the ends on each side here, and then you sew these through all the way around. So every maybe 3 beads or 2 beads if you want to, you just cross across, and then it makes it nice and secure, and then you tie it off on the ends, and then it's ready to go. So you can use this technique to do dog collars, you can use this technique to do halters, and I even have a couple reins. There's a little bit of a trick when there's like a V or a U, but otherwise it's the same kind of technique. So I'll go through that with you, and stay tuned. Let's get making one. So first I'm going to grab my Browband. So I'm going to use a straight brown one for this one, and I have a couple rose gold and silver beads so that you can see them nice and bright and we can see what we're doing on this video. So the first thing you need is your Browband. I just lay it flat so I can see it, and I have my thread. So you can't really see it. It's like a fishing, like a braided fishing thread. I've used wire before, and I found the wire always broke. So I do use the fishing thread, and I find that that works really well. And so what you want to do is take your thread and you want to make it twice the length of your Browband, or just under that. So you have lots of room to work on each side. So I'm just going to measure this out here. And for scissors, I just use little nail clippers. So that allows me to kind of get in close to the Browband, and I can clip both ends really easy on that. Okay. Perfect. So I have my thread, and I want to bead both. So I have 2 threads the same size. 2 threads the same size, and I'm beading onto both. So you can see there's 2 threads, and I'm beading on to both. So we'll see what our design looks like here. Okay, so I'm thinking something like this pattern. Show you one second. So I'm going to use something like that, and it'll lay in just like that. And so what I'll do is I'll finish this, and we'll go to the next step. if you can see, I have it pretty much level. I know it's a little blurry. Pretty much level there with the end of the channel. But if we go across, the end of the channel ends just before this bead. And the reason why I added an extra one is because when it lays flat, it looks like it's over full. But when you bend it and hold on to both kind of strings, or you don't want to drop them all off, you'll see that it fits perfectly. It just adds that little bit of extra room. And so now we get to sew it in. Okay, so I have Glover or leather needles, which is definitely what you want to get. That makes sure that it's durable enough. You will find sometimes they break, but they definitely need to be strong enough to get through that leather. So there's 4 strings, so 2 at each end, and we'll just string one at a time and sew them through. So if you look at the Browband, you can see that there is the padding here. So what we're doing is we're going to sew it through the channel and come in between the padding and the leather from the Browband on each side. So it doesn't matter top or bottom, they're both the same, but that's what we're aiming for, is just this gap in between. And yeah, that's kind of the spot where all your threads will go, and then it'll be hidden. So just being careful so we don't lose all the beads off of our string, but I'll just stick it through with my fingers kind of a little bit first. And what I use to sew is just a pair of needle nose pliers. So just your run-of-the-mill, whatever is in the toolbox, that works. So I thread it through. You can see it's just going through that channel in the very, very corner and coming out right in between. Here, I'll see if I can get it even better. Yeah, right in between the Browband and the padding. So we'll pull it through. Pull each one through and take your needle off and onto the next thread. And so you'll want to do the same thing, but a few stitches in between the other, where the other thread came back, and this one. So then what'll happen is you'll have them both at different spots. So you can see this one's coming out here, and then I just have probably 1 or 2 stitches in between where the needle's coming out here. And so it's at different little spots here. And what I'm going to do is tie a couple knots. Easy peasy. So let's just tie them and try to get the knot right down into that gap there. We want to make sure we're not pulling the thread too much, or else we'll pull it out, pull the beads right off. And then I just use the other end, and I'm just pulling it real tight so that the knot goes right down deep into that, gap. And so what I do to end it is, so instead of just making one knot and one cross, what I'll do is I'll cross it once, so that's like a normal thing, and then I'll just cross it over again. So cross it through twice, and that seems to do the trick to just kind of complete that knot. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same with the other side before I trim anything, just in case, you never know. So again, I just want to make sure everything's good and it fits before I do this. Looks good. Okay, so needle goes through one. And typically I want it, if it's coming out the bottom of this one, I'll want it to come out the bottom of this one too. I don't think it really matters, but probably a good idea. And it does take some practice to kind of know where that little spot is that you need to come out from. Sometimes you'll come out through the leather and sometimes you'll come out through the padding, so just try to practice that and then you won't get holes all over the leather. Okay, so the other one goes in and I'm aiming for a couple stitches difference on either side so that it's attached onto the brow band. Because you would hate your knot to just come out through that gap and then you lose all your beads when you're on a dressage test or something. Okay, and again, I'm just going to pull it tight. I just want to double check. I would hate to have to go back and undo everything. Okay, I'm making sure it's relatively tight. If it was loose, so let's give it a little bit of slack here. You can see how it's just, well, first of all, it doesn't want to stay on, but you can see how it's bulgy, and then when you go to sew it in, it'll just be a little bit difficult. So if it's tighter, it makes it really easy to sew that in. So yeah. So I'm just gonna knot that up. So I do kind of 2 knots, double knot, and then I do the one where I loop it through a couple times. So 1 loop and 2 loops. We could even do 1 more. Of course, you never want that to come undone, so we'll do 1 more in this one. Okay, so this thread that I'm using, it is, like I said, it's a fishing wire, so it's has about 30 pounds of strength on it. So if it's pulled tight, it shouldn't ever come loose, shouldn't ever break. It's meant for, you know, being in the water, meant for being outside. So any of those, the weathering and stuff isn't really a concern. And yeah, it's just generally really strong. It has a little bit of give. So I really recommend that for doing brow bands with. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking the end of the little scissors here and I'm just pushing in any extra strings or knots. So I'm just pushing that in, making sure that it's all hidden. Okay, so now it's not quite in yet, but it's attached on both ends. So now our job is to sew the beads in, so it's not, the beads are actually secure on there. So for that, you can either use the same thread, so that fishing thread, or what I use is this brown like outdoor thread. So it's a little bit more inexpensive than the fishing one, and it's just as good just for sewing it in. So I have brown, I have black, and yeah, they're great. I haven't had any issues with them at all. And so with this one, what you want to do is you want to spread your arm. So you want to take your end and spread your arms all the way out and get your thread that way. So you want lots and lots of slack for this, since you're going to be going in and out, in and out, in and out, and you want to make sure that you have enough. Okay, so grab my needle again, put it on this thread. Okay, and what I'm going to do is the same idea. So it's attached here. So I'll probably attach it every maybe bead spacer, and then, you know, every 2 or 3. So I'll probably go in between here and then maybe in between here, and then we'll just make sure it's nice and secure. If you are doing a U, you want to make sure you're probably doing every, as you're getting into the U, probably every 2 beads, just to make sure it's nice and secure where you want it through that U or that V. Especially if you're doing the peak of a V, you want to make sure you're going on either side of that center bead, so to make sure that it holds exactly where you want it to. But yeah, so we'll do this, and I don't do the knot first, so I'm just gonna push this in there. So same idea, except I'm going up in between the padding and the brow band here, and I'm aiming right beside the bead where I want it, where I want to hold that, and coming out through the channel. Where am I here? Right where it opens. You can see the little needle here. So right where the channel and the bottom mix, go over the bead like that, and I grab it at the other side and pull it through. So there we go. I'm gonna leave myself a little bit of a tail there just to work with to tie that knot. So for the first one, what I want to do is I'm going to go around this first bead, and then I'm going to come out, I'm going to tie the knot to this, and then I can continue on. So we want to just make sure that first part's secure. So same thing, use my hand first just to kind of place the needle just in that little spot right between the channel. And through the other side, you can kind of see between the brow band and the padding, see how it's coming out there. And make sure the thread's where you want it, so it goes over that bead, or sorry, beside the bead. So it's kind of hidden. And then I'm just going to frame that little spacer, so there's not going to be very much room, and then we can do our knot and secure it. Same thing, back. So I'm just putting it on the other side of that bead. Sorry, it's blurry here. So it's just on the other side. I have to rethread my needle. And back through we go. Okay, and so we have the short one and a long one. So we went around just this one spacer here in the middle, and we're going to tie these up. Okay. So again, I just do the one knot, and then I do the double one, perfect, and one more, because why not? Okay, and I just leave that tail there for now. I can trim that up at the end, and I'll just keep going. Like I said, just going back and forth through, you know, every probably 3 beads I'll do it beside every spacer, and here, and here. And so you go up, So you don't need to go around each spacer. You can go, we'll go this way for the other one, we'll go across and we'll go down. And the thread, when you go across, it just lays in that, that bed between the brow band and the padding. So you don't need to worry about cutting or tying knots each time. So we'll go up and down, and then as it goes across, it'll lay in that bed where it's hidden, and then we'll end up here. So here we go. To say, as I'm sewing the beads in, I'm kind of holding it in the shape that I would want it to be in the end, because that way I'll know exactly how I want to sew them in, the shape of the beads, all that stuff. The other thing is, if I were to hold it flat, the beads would, I would sew them straight, and then you'd see a bulge at the end. So I want to keep it consistent and flat, so the beads all look nice and straight as I'm going. So if you wanted to tie that as you're doing it, I just, if you saw me, I was just kind of holding it like this, just to kind of place and know where I want to place the needle, where I want the beads to be. So I'm right at the end. I have just one more little piece to do. So what I want to do is tie it in as well. So so what I'm going to do, I'm coming out this side. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to go around this spacer bead. So just like I did in the beginning. So I'm going to go this way around the spacer bead. I'm going to come around, and then I'm going to tie it in so it's nice and secure. The other thing I'll say, it is a little bit annoying because you're working with this massive length of thread. Sometimes it'll loop around the brow band as you're working. So you might have seen me just kind of untying it from looping around. Okay, so I'm on one side of the spacer. Just gonna pop on the other side here. So in the same way as I've kind of been doing. Okay, oh, and here it is looped around. Okay, so it's pretty tight. I'm just going to use the needle and pull out the previous loop so that I have something to tie it to. So just gently pull so you don't break it, because otherwise you have to start again. Okay, so you can see I have the little loop and my longer thread. And so what I'm going to do, you can keep the needle on or just do it by hand. I like to do it with the needle for this one though. Is just to kind of sew it through and just to create that knot. And for this one, like whatever secures it, I think is good. And then I kind of go through one more time. If you can see that thread. Now it's a little bit tighter, but just to go underneath it or through it. And then I try to do that double thing again, just to make sure we're nice and secure. And again, why not? Why not do another knot? I'd rather have it more secure than not, so. Okay, and trim off that excess. Push it down if necessary, just to hide that a little bit. And I'm going to trim off that beginning little thread too. Okay, perfect. There you have it. There is a beautiful brow band ready to go onto a bridle. And it's secure. So when you push it out and it's straight, it's gonna bulge, right? Because it's made to be round. So it should never really be straight. And if you're displaying it, I would just tie it with a ribbon between these, just so it holds as it should be. Enjoy making your brow band. Thank you for watching.